All right, another Crooked Spine Show podcast interview with Dr. Mike Diamonte, correct? Biamonte?
Yes, Biamonte.
Biamonte. And the title is It's Okay to Have Candida in Your Body Until, and we're talking about today testing recovery from Candida, overgrowth, and their secondary health conditions. So, I said before too to someone, don't be alarmed. Bacteria, fungus are living in our body even when we're healthy. These are there are certain lifestyle conditions that can cause overgrowth and health problems can occur. Candida is one of these. Good.
I was just going to say that's all we're concerned with. There's so many patients get false data from their doctors. Doctors tell them everyone has Candida, which is true. We're only concerned with overgrowth, and we want to document the overgrowth with testing so that we know what we're doing.
And that is the issue too. Is really Candida is one of those natural fungi that can deteriorate our health over time. That's the thing, is the secondary conditions, right, Doc? That's the issue for one also. Okay. Let's get right into it for one. Why do you find this a way to, if you want to call it, become passionate about versus your previous occupation?
Are you speaking generally or regarding Candida?
Generally, why transition from your previous occupation to focusing on Candida?
It's, I guess, because of the mystery component of it. Okay. Is what got me interesting, because I had so many patients who had Candida, I didn't know it, and then I told them to go to their doctors, and I told them to go tell him you have Candida and have him cure you of it, and then come back to me, and I'll put you back on supplements and diet. And they went to the doctors. The doctors told them everyone has Candida. There's no such thing as Candida. All these crazy comments. So at that point, I sent them. Now, this is back in the 80s.
Okay.
And so back then, I didn't know much about it. So what I did was I sent them to Bob Atkins. Bob Atkins and Ronald Hoffman were at that time the two major alternative doctors in New York City, which is where I was.
Okay.
And they went there and they said, well, this was much better. They told me, they know what you're talking about. They said, yeah, Candida does exist. They did a stool sample on me. They found the Candida and they put me on nystatin or whatever the drug was. And I felt better for a couple of weeks. But then after a while, the drug stopped working and it all came back again. So I said, I've got to figure this out myself then. And that's how I became obsessed with figuring out the riddle of Candida.
And you said there wasn't much research back then, too. Obviously, they knew what it was. I read your part of your intro for your book. Also, put the link in the show notes. A lot of it is natural, but why does it get out of control? And how come? Like you had mentioned before, too, is people aren't focusing on this as someone's primary condition, causing certain autoimmune conditions, long-term conditions, also, which is crazy.
Well, a lot of the reason why is because doctors are the very people who cause Candida. Candida is mostly iatrogenic, which means doctor-induced. It's the medications that they tend to hand out like candy, which cause Candida in people. So that makes it very difficult for them to then accept responsibility and want to pursue treating or investigating the condition.
And that's part of it too. Going back to Candida and someone who named not what that is, go over what it actually is for one, two, if you don't mind, for my audience.
Sure.
Where it is, where it sleeps, where it eats, where it does everything.
Candida is an organism which is part yeast and part fungus. It's actually an organism that's called dimorphic, which means it can exist or live in two different states. It can live as a yeast or it can live as a fungus. And like a chameleon, it can switch itself back and forth. Candida resides in the mucous membranes of the body. So it's in your mouth, it's in your throat, it's in your colon, anywhere there's a mucous membrane, your lungs, wherever. But primarily, Candida grows in your intestinal tract. And the colon is its major place. It also is in your small intestine, but the colon is the major place where it lives. Candida is kept under control by primarily two species of bacteria. In the intestinal tract, the small intestine, Candida is controlled by Lactobacillus acidophilus. In the colon, Candida is controlled by bifidus bacteria, bifidum. If anything happens to compromise either of these bacteria, it's like you're interrupting the food chain, and the Candida can then grow and become a dominant part of your commensal flora rather than a subdominant or minor part. The actual role that Candida plays in your body is interesting. It tends to stimulate the immune response in your intestines against other organisms. But it also, when you die, it is also the thing that decomposes your body. Embalming fluid is nothing more than a big dose of antifungal that stops the Candida from decomposing you.
And you talked about two bacteria that actually do keep it under control, or I'm sorry, fungus. But what makes those go away or depletes that in your body?
Again, we're back to the same old thing. It's iatrogenic. It's drug induced. Corticosteroids can destroy them. Antibiotics are the obvious thing that destroy them. Even excessive amounts of analgesics. If someone's taking a lot of Valium, anything that slows your metabolism down or that numbs you can also cause them to overgrow.
Is there something in the medication that actually makes that happen, or just in general medication?
There is something in each medication. Each one has a unique way that it does it. Antibiotics do this. The Merck manual will tell you it's the broad spectrum, it's the indiscriminate use of broad spectrum antibiotics, which wipe out all the friendly bacteria that controls Candida. When you're dealing with corticoid steroids, the steroids increase the glucose content in the mucus in your intestinal tract, and they also raise the glucose content in your tiny blood vessels, and that's what the Candida feeds on. When you're dealing with anything that's a sedative, the sedatives slow down your digestion. They make your intestinal pH elevate, and they cut back your hydrochloric acid level, and then that makes the Candida grow. So each medication has a different way that it does this.
If someone has, for example, diabetes type 2, which is more of a glucose sugar issue, does that also increase their chance of having an overgrowth of Candida?
Absolutely.
And with a medication that someone gets for diabetes type 2, does that also lead to higher Candida amounts?
Absolutely.
So it's almost looking at the overall condition and looking at that as always a secondary condition would be something a ethical doctor would do.
Yes, I would believe so. This is why diabetic patients are so prevalent to have amputations of their feet. It's not just because the glucose is interfering with their circulation, it's also the Candida doing that.
It's amazing. It's almost like if someone's getting, for example, cancer treatments, they're going to get a white blood cell count of blood work done every time. If someone's on medication, why aren't they giving a blood work or a Candida, which is easy to do, I'm assuming, a Candida test every time they have new medication upgrades or a new medication refill? Why is that not happening?
I would like to know that answer too. And but when you pull the string on this, what you end up finding out is that if a medical doctor, and some of my best friends are medical doctors, let me say, I'm not going to make any jokes about MD meaning mental deficient, because they're some of my best friends. However, if a medical doctor is going to investigate Candida, he immediately has to hire more staff. Because there is no way a medical doctor can deal with Candida in his patients. Medical doctor spends an average of 5 to 7 minutes with the patient. The patient's going to have questions about diet. That alone can take 20 minutes to go over the Candida diet. Then you have to talk about the medication. Then you have to talk about possible Herxheimer reactions, which is a die-off reaction that you may have to the medication. For those who don't know what that is, when you take any medication that kills yeast, bacteria, viruses, Lyme disease, parasites, when those organisms die in your body, you can feel sick from that because there's a lot of dead, like allergic protein being released, right? So the people feel bad, and they feel like they have the flu or crazy things. So somebody has to hat them and educate them on that. So the average medical doctor just doesn't have time to do this. He's going to have to hire more staff. Therefore, he tends to ignore it.
And what are signs of someone, say a normal person listening to this, would start to feel if they have a Candida overgrowth?
Okay, this is what the person needs to do. Sit down with a piece of paper, draw a line.
Okay.
You want to put on the line what date you can easily spot where you felt the best and you felt like you didn't have any symptoms or problems. Then move forward, come to where you feel your problems first began, mark that and put the date there. Now look between that date and the original date and try to find out if you were on any antibiotics, any drugs, if you had an accident, a car accident, you had something that might trigger the Candida. And the type of symptoms you're looking for, first off, are fatigue. That's the first thing that you'll get with a Candida overgrowth. You'll begin with fatigue. Then you'll start noticing months later digestive problems, bloating, constipation, gas, all types of things, maybe even a lot of excess acid or reflux. Then it's going to move to another group of symptoms, which could be rashes, arthritic feelings. You could be diagnosed as having rheumatoid arthritis or some type of arthritis.
Inflammatory joint conditions.
Exactly. When you keep going, up the line, the person then will start noticing they started to become allergic or had a lot of food intolerances. Foods they used to eat, they can no longer tolerate. Maybe they get a rash, maybe they get a headache, maybe they just feel sick. Eventually, they're going to notice that they become intolerant in general of most things. We used to call it in the old days a universal reactor. It's the person who walks out of his house, a car goes by, the exhaust fumes give him a headache. He can't go to a bar. The smoke will drive him crazy. The perfume will drive him crazy. He can't walk down the aisle in the supermarket where they have cleaning solutions because those things will give him symptoms. And that's about where the Candida is going to be at a peak for a while until it starts to cause other chronic degenerative conditions. Candida is very much like cancer in a lot of ways. The first way it's like cancer is that sugar feeds it and makes it spread. The second thing is Candida can literally eat into your tissues. Just like cancer cells eat into tissues, eat into bone, Candida can do virtually the same. So when you look at the amount of symptoms there are from Candida, it depends on how you want to list them, but it could be anywhere between 75 to 150 different symptoms, which people would never equate having anything to do with each other. Because you could have a person who goes to the doctor, I have all this digestive problem, and the doctor helps him with that, but he has arthritis. Now, does he think the digestive problem has anything to do with the arthritis? No, but it's all the same. It's all the same source, the original source. That's why when we treat people for Candida, they come in with their symptoms. They come in with their box of symptoms. They put it on the table. They go, here now. Here's the box. I want you to look at this. I need you to handle this box. As we're handling the main root of the problem, all of a sudden, other symptoms that they weren't even thinking about go away. And that's why it's important, and what I do, that we keep a very good list of all their symptoms, and we check on all those symptoms after a while, because after the person's in the treatment, you ask them, well, how's this symptom? Oh, I forgot about this. Yeah, I don't know what happened. It just went away. This is a typical thing that you find because it causes so many symptoms.
You tell them it's just magic. You don't know what you did. Just it's magic. It happens.
Well, I have a wand that I take out usually, and I tell them it was this wand that I was using.
When you were looking, I put it right across your head.
That's right.
And that's the thing. It's almost like I did a talk a couple days ago, actually, last couple of days. It's how medical doctors will compartmentalize your symptoms, but not treat the underlying cause.
When I was first out of medical school, the first group of professionals I worked with were at Grumman Aerospace. They were all systems analysis engineers. They were naturopaths, nutritionists, medical doctors, physiologists, aerophysiologists. But the one thing they all had in common is they were systems analysis engineers. And working with them for 10 years totally changed my life because it allowed me to look at the body or someone's health from the viewpoint of an engineer, which a doctor doesn't do. A doctor is a subspecialist. He has this one thing that he'll do, and that's it. And to do something else, he refers you to somebody else. An engineer can look at the entire picture and see how everything is relating to each other, and that hits upon your statement.
And that's the key, I think. When look someone's health maybe can use something else, what is the underlying cause? Is there one? Is your healthcare practitioner even looking for one too? Are they asking the right questions? Like you said, they have 5 minutes. 5 minutes may not be long enough for most people. For most people that have more than one symptom, more than one problem. Going into your book too, the research and success with your patients on your website, everything else, what drove you to write the book, That Candida Chronicles?
The Candida Chronicles is named the Candida Chronicles because it actually chronicled my journey personally of going through the adventure of figuring out the riddle to Candida. Because in figuring that out, I had many obstacles. And I got a lot of false data from a lot of sources. And what I found was successful was listening to the patient, which is something that a lot of doctors don't do enough, especially medical doctors. I listened to what the patient said and I believed him. I took the data he gave me and then I reversed engineered what he was telling me. And once I reversed engineered it and I came up with what my postulate would be or theory, I went and hit the textbooks to see if I could find it in the textbooks. And that's what I did with virtually every logic or axiom that's in my book. That's how I arrived at those.
It's amazing when you can do it that way, like more thinking like an engineer. At that point, you can actually get to the root cause of what problem should be. It's amazing. In your book, too, you had mentioned too, explain the vitamin mineral connection.
Well, there are certain vitamins which aggravate Candida and make it worse.
Okay.
And you'll actually see this when you study the little insert that comes in some antifungal medications. You'll actually see when you look at the mechanism of action of the drug, you will see that some of the antifungal drugs work by blocking Candida's uptake of vitamin D.
Okay.
Some of them work by blocking the uptake of iron to the Candida. So that tells you these are all essential nutrients that the Candida needs to survive. So if the drug kills it by blocking them, then how are you going to benefit by loading your system up with these things?
You're not going to get, like I said, and understanding the uptake, you're not going to be able to absorb anything in your body that actually would help benefit your overall health.
Problem with Candida is with iron and anemia. Most of the women with Candida are iron deficient because the Candida is getting the iron before they do.
And explain then, based on that, how would you fix that problem?
You have to not take supplements because supplements are usually the thing that are powerful enough to aggravate the Candida. When we deal with anemic people with Candida, we give them desiccated liver tablets. And that small amount that's in there in the nutritional complex is able to help them. And there's a host of other nutrients. We have two sides of the coin. We have one group of nutrients which make Candida worse, which include iron, copper, vitamin D, coenzyme Q10. All of those nutrients aggravate Candida. And on the other side, you have the nutrients that act as antidotes against the Candida medicines, which are largely antioxidants. The reason why this is, most herbs or pharmaceuticals that attempt to kill pathogens do it by creating oxidative stress against the membrane of the pathogen. So when you dose with antioxidants, you're reducing the oxidative stress that's generated by the medicine against the pathogen.
And it's not just that pathogen or bacteria or virus, it's the whole body, correct?
Yes, that is
affected by the antibiotic, for example.
That is true.
Well, and then going to your book again too, what is the Biamonte method, your trademark method, Doc?
Well, the trademark method goes through all the logics and axioms that are in the book. Like, for instance, we don't give probiotics to anyone in the beginning of the treatment because we know the Candida will repel the probiotics and they'll end up in the toilet. Okay. We only give the probiotics when we have the Candida levels in the environment in the gut at the right point where it will receive the probiotic and they will stick. That's one of the first rules. Next rule is you always have to rotate.
Sorry. Is that based on time, based on how they're feeling? How would you base the next
based
step
on the level of Candida in your gut? We have a test that we do in our office. It's a urine test that measures the amount of Candida activity, and we never give anyone probiotics until that test reaches a certain lower level.
So that's going to be your baseline testing. So every time someone changes protocol, it's based on what their urine comes out with.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay, perfect.
We also know we have to rotate antifungals. Candida becomes drug resistant to any antifungal, whether it's pharmaceutical or herbal, after 21 days. At 21 days is the point where the genetic switching takes place and Candida starts to mutate. So therefore, we pick 4 days or 7, depending on what type of antifungal we're using. So every 4 days, we switch to a different one. So typically, a person will get 4 antifungals from us, and they'll switch them every 4 days. So they might use biocidin for 4 days, then switch from biocidin to Colorex for 4 days, then switch to Candibactin, AR and BR for 4 days, then go back to biocidin and just keep switching. And if you don't do that, then the Candida is going to become drug resistant within a few months. And that's what the problem with nystatin is. Doctors give nystatin every day for months and months. At one point in my practice, we used to do stool cultures using this very advanced medium from France. And we found that the majority of the people who came to us, probably 90% of everyone who came to us, who knew they had Candida, who had been treating it, who had doctors treating it, none of them had Candida albicans. Every single one of them had Candida glabrata or Candida tropicalis, which are mutated forms. Now, the people who came to us who didn't know what Candida was, and we were testing them to see if they had it, they all had Candida albicans.
Nah. So basically, it's prolonged drug use will cause that to
mutation
to not be able to basically be resistant at that point.
Right, drug resistant. Yes.
How many forms can it mutate to, or is it
as many species as there are? But typically it goes to from Candida albicans to glabrata or tropicalis, very often to tropicalis. Although there are strains of Candida in Japan that come from Japan that are much worse. There's Candida auris. Candida auris has come from Japan, and it's virtually completely drug resistive. There was a few studies were done where they had a couple pharmaceuticals with cinnamon oil and clove oil and some other essential oils in order to kill it. Otherwise, it wouldn't die.
Amazing. And why do they have a different strain there in Japan?
I don't know that. I don't know.
That's been your next book,
Probably.
Part 2.
Well, hopefully, Candida auris really hasn't made a big hit here so far, so hopefully.
Okay. And then you spoke about your method for one too in your testing. And is the urine testing the only thing you really do, or do you other testings too?
We rely mostly on the urine test that I developed, which measures Candida free radicals, Candida immune complex proteins that are urinated, and also indican levels. That gives us a really good shot at what's going on with the person in real time. We also use the oats test and the oats panel for dysbiosis. The primary thing we're looking at there is arabinose levels. Arabinose is very accurate for Candida in the urine. And then we use the GI map. Arabinose it's an organic acid.
Okay.
Which is almost exclusively released by Candida.
Jeez. Wow. Okay.
There are a few other organic acids that are released from Candida, but the arabinose is the purest one because there's a minor amount of things that could mimic that. With some of the other organic acids associated with Candida, there's a few other things that could be going on that could be causing it, and not the Candida. That's why the arabinose is the most important.
And if someone's coming in your office the first time and they know they have Candida issues, they want to understand what you do, and they're just a lay person, how would you explain your method, your Biamonte method, to them?
It's a very good question. I would explain to them that there are certain rules we have. I gave you 2 so far. No probiotics in the beginning, not until they're ready. Rotate your antifungals. But there's also 5 stages of the treatment. We have phase 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Phase 0 is like a colon cleanse for Candida that eliminates the surface layers and starts to clean out their gut so that we can expose the Candida that's there on the mucus lining. Phase 1 is where we rotate antifungals systemically. That would be things like lomatium or spilanthes, any of these herbs that are able to kill Candida systemically via your lymph system. That phase 1 kills 70% of their Candida. Phase 2 is where we concentrate on killing Candida in the nest. That's deep in the gut, because that's where the probiotics get repelled. So in that case, we use fatty acid-based antifungals to destroy the Candida in their intestinal tract. That's seriously important, because if you don't kill that Candida that's deep in their gut, the probiotics can't stick. Then we go to the probiotic program, and in the probiotic program, we use a series of probiotics that are mixed with prebiotics into a smoothie. We found that's the best way it works, because all of that, the probiotic and the prebiotics are all mixed together, and when you drink it down, the probiotics can immediately start feeding on the prebiotics, or the prebiotics can start modulating the environment in the intestine to make it more suitable for the probiotic to grow. That's where we consider that's the end of our Candida treatment, technically. Okay. The next phases that we go through, the first thing we do when the patient's clear of Candida is we test them for chemical toxicities and metal toxicities, because these are the things that are going to allow the Candida to come back. So we want to know their glyphosate levels. We want to know, like, we'll use the test from Mosaic, which was Great Plains. We use their test that looks for any type of chemical, any toxin, chemical toxin, which is in the environment that they may be overloaded with. Then we look for toxic metals. Toxic metals in ways are more important because toxic metals stop your body from being able to detoxify and excrete chemical toxins.
Got it.
So
Okay.
that's the bottom line. We want to check their toxicity because that's what's going to cause them to relapse. If they have elevated mercury, if they have elevated copper, those are the things that are going to cause a relapse. When the toxicity is handled, then we just rebalance all their amino acids or vitamins like any other practitioner would do. And then the very last thing we may do with them is put them on some super immune boosters if they've been really run down.
Mm-hmm.
But we find usually the Candida patient, one of the first things that they manifest after their Candida is gone is they'll start focusing on their fatigue and all the adrenal symptoms they have, because Candida beats the devils out of your adrenals. So we find that usually the person needs to have an adrenal program when the Candida is gone to get their adrenal glands back. Because your adrenal, see, with the immune system, you basically have two different ways to stimulate it. You have a sympathetic innervated response and parasympathetic innervated response. The sympathetic system stimulates your immune system via your adrenals, and the parasympathetic system stimulates your immune system via your thymus gland. So if you get that adrenal back up online, you've got half the battle handled right there, because their immune system will come back pretty quick.
How do you increase your thymus gland hormone production, or what would you call it?
Well, it's thymosin is what the thymus makes.
Thymosin, okay.
But the primary thing that you can do, which is very easy, is there are herbs that will do that, and there's also using the thymus protein, the old traditional standard process products.
Standard process been around forever. With your first program, before you hit the toxic chemicals and metals, how long does that program normally take, or is that just based on someone's symptoms when they do the urinalysis?
Average is 9 months to a year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when I see these things from multi-level companies talking about how they get rid of Candida in a few weeks, it's hysterical, because these poor people are being led astray. You can't get rid of Candida that fast. You can't even change the pH of your colon stably that fast. So that doesn't happen.
It's almost something to where, are they really doing it, or something to where, well, you're good enough? It's almost like, do they retest? That was my first question. How did they test initially, and when did they do the retest? Usually say, we didn't retest. Why would they retest for?
Well, the answer to that question is no and no, because usually they never tested in the first place. They go by their symptoms. And since they never tested in the beginning, why should they retest? But when that's why I get people who come and they'll sit down with this very serious face, really rigid. They'll say, I have the worst case of leaky gut you're ever going to see in your life.
Like,
I have this symptom, that symptom. I've been treating my leaky gut for 10 years and it's not any better. I say, gee, okay. Well, I said, what tests did you do? Oh, I don't need a test for leaky. I know I have leaky gut. I said, humor me a sec. I just want to test you and see. Half the time they don't have leaky gut. Half the time they've been treating themselves for something they thought they had for 10 years and they don't have it. So this is what my Bible is said: test the patient. Mm-hmm. You avoid so much trouble. And it's also a matter of science, because if you don't have a baseline, then when you go forward, you have nothing to compare. You don't know where you're at, except the symptoms. And the person's symptoms could be vacillating for whatever reason. I had a patient once who every time he saw his mother-in-law, he had a bloody nose. Now, why was that? I don't know. It has nothing to do with science. The guy gets a bloody nose when he sees his mother-in-law. Who knows what's going on in his head? Yeah. All I know is it's not a scientific way to calibrate anything. So you always have to test people. You have to have a baseline test, and you have to test them periodically to see if they're making progress or not. That gives you an objective look.
And why do some doctors disagree with that?
Lazy. Lazy. It's either lazy or their insurance won't cover it. That's the other gag, is the patient, he needs all of this work done as long as the insurance covers it. And once the insurance doesn't cover it, it's not important. We can forget it.
Good enough. Good enough.
Good. And that's another gag.
Anything I missed that you wanted to bring up today?
Yes, there is actually one thing we didn't miss, which is important. COVID.
Okay.
Studies coming from Japan show that COVID actually kills the bifidus bacteria in your colon.
Really?
So this would mean that the COVID virus is able to give people Candida. And we had this during the outbreak of COVID that we had a few years ago. We had a lot of patients returning to us saying that their Candida was coming back and they didn't know why. And then we found this reference. And this also applies to the vax. The vax does the same thing. So if you get vaxxed, you can get Candida because that's also going to kill the bifidus bacteria in your colon.
So the vax too then, well.
Yeah. And if anyone is interested in learning more about the truth about the vaccine, there's a great book I could recommend.
Okay.
The name of the book is The Real Anthony Fauci. It's written by RFK Jr., who happened to get all his emails somehow. And the information in there between Fauci and Bill Gates and a lot of these globalists will blow your mind. I couldn't get past page 5 without grabbing my head and saying, "Oh my God, I knew this was true."
And sometimes looking back, it can be a Monday morning quarterback type of mental event, but it's almost like when things line up, things line up.
That's true. Truth is truth. So much now is coming out about COVID and about the vaccine. I think the state of Nebraska now is leading the way. They're suing Pfizer for misrepresentation on the vaccine. There's just so much. The truth is finally coming out. It turns out that all the crazy unvaxxed conspiracy theory people were all right. They were all correct about it.
They didn't have the evidence yet to prove it.
No, and plus there was a tremendous push to suppress the evidence. The Biden administration, what's his face? Zuckerberg admitted that the Biden administration had deliberately contacted them and made them suppress any kind of information that was not pro-vaccine. He's already admitted that. So there it is.
That's the truth. That's not a conspiracy. That's the truth.
That's the truth. That's true.
Wow. And then one more thing too. The first step in helping someone. What is the first step in helping someone suffering from Candida? Overgrowth.
The first step is to realize you have it and document that you have it. That has to be the first step. This way you know what you're up against, because at that point, the person then on their own can make decisions and changes in their diet, which immediately can help. They can remove things from their diet and their lifestyle, which are going to constantly aggravate the Candida.
Can they do a self-test, or do you do that with patients that are, for example, not near Queens, New York? Well,
actually, all our patients are done via telephone or via a computer, like as we're doing now. All our patients are done that way, and we send them the urine test to their house, and they perform the urine. There's an odd thing about the urine test we found is that it needed to be done on first morning urine, otherwise it wasn't totally accurate. So, we can't have people flying in with urine and things like that. It's not going to work. So we set it up so that it's a kit where we can mail it to them. They can do it at home, and has full colored instructions, and they can just do it at home and get the correct, accurate results.
You're almost helping someone know right away what the levels are, correct?
Exactly. And then we're getting our baseline that we need.
Good. That helps the patient and you, obviously.
And then luckily for us, there are so many labs now that will send kits directly to the patient's house. Mm-hmm. You have Mosaic / Great Plains, you have Genova Labs, Doctor's Data. So many of these labs will just send the kit directly to the patient. And most of the collections that we need for Candida involve either stool or urine. Okay. So we don't have to worry about them getting a venipuncture. But if they need blood work, they can contact one of the many outlets now that exist, like Direct Labs. DirectLabs.com can do just about any blood test on anybody, and they're in every major city, and you don't need a medical doctor.
Labs.com. Got it. Okay. And I think that you make it when it's that simple to do and that accessible. Why wouldn't someone who's gone through prolonged, say, antibiotic use or just medication use in general that feels, I want to call it fibromyalgia because it's more of a general term medically, where you go, okay, I just feel like everything's off. Get my blood work done. Get my urine test done. Send it to Dr. Biamonte and see what he says. Boom.
It's a great idea. There's no excuse because all these things are accessible with the internet now.
Makes it easy.
I did my
Quick
first
smell.
phone consultation in 1984
Now, was
with,
that the
with people
dial-up
in
phone?
Texas.
Was it the dial-up
Probably,
phone?
yeah. 1984 was the first time I did a consultation with somebody, not in person, via some kind of electronic instrument. And then by 1987, we had at least a third of our practice was that way. And then coming into 2006, it went 100% virtual. We have patients who have been live a block away from where our office was, who we didn't see in person for 15 or 20 years because they and their family just were doing everything virtual.
When you make it that easier for people, I mean, it's something. It's almost a no-brainer. When you talk to someone on the phone, how much do you get from their for example, their tone of voice, kind of words they use? How much is that going to help you give them a proper diagnosis besides the words they're using?
Well, it's that's a very good question because their communication lag tells me how far I have to dig.
Got it.
Their knowledge of the subject matter tells me how much I have to educate them in order to see if it indicates to them or if it rings a bell for them. So I
It's
would
almost
say
like
go ahead.
it's almost like you're asking, once they say something, you're asking a question based on that to look for plan A or plan B, plan A or plan B.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Good.
I've been doing this since 1984. And I've learned that your skills as an investigator or interrogator are really important to find out what's going on because the person in front of you usually has so much false data that they've gotten from the news media, the legacy news, as they're now calling it. There's so much false data they've gotten from the news, so much false data they've gotten from their insurance companies, from their doctors, that you have to some degree re-educate them. And because it's the truth, the key thing is because you're giving them the truth comes before the lie. Truths always come before. The truth always existed before the lies. So because of that, when they spot something, it's boom. If it's true for them, then they see it. If it's not true for them, you have the wrong item. But if it is true for them, boom, they'll get it.
You almost, I would take a patient and go, okay, they're naive. They just don't know the right truth, what they need to get themselves better.
That's a person who has a lot of false data. So what you have to do with that person is you have to ask them, what is their truth, so to speak? And if that's false, you then find out from them where they heard this. Then you have to go to the source of where they heard this, and then you have to show them that it's false by comparing that to the true data.
It's amazing when someone is patient enough to understand that, not just take whatever the first word comes out of a doctor's mouth is actually truth every time.
Well, I had a patient the other day. A doctor says there's no such thing as Candida. I said, oh, really? Which doctor was that? It was Dr. So-and-so. Okay, what was he basing that on? And I really don't know. Okay, well, let me show you an excerpt from one of the textbooks he studied in college that talks about Candida and talks about what it could do. Oh, the patient says, geez, why didn't this guy know this? What, he forgot his education?
Yeah, it's almost like some doctors are treated like, well, if that comes out of their mouth, it must be true. You know, they realize they don't have all the information. And when you start breaking down and asking them, where do you hear that from? And the doctor gets defensive, any type of doctor, you go, okay, then you got to back up yourself and go, okay, let me find the real truth.
Yes.
Easy.
That's true.
What takeaway do you want to have first, doctor, for my audience and future audience to understand your book, understand you, understand your method, your systems?
I think what they need to look at, because this is how most people come across this. Most people don't know what's wrong with them, but they know something's wrong.
Got it.
And with the internet, they go online and they start researching all these things. If they're lucky enough, they'll find what's correct for them.
Okay.
If they're not, they'll try something and they'll keep researching and looking. I typically get patients who my patients are very educated who come to me. By the time the patient comes to me, he's seen at least 10 other doctors. It's usually been 10 years that he's been doing this, and he has spent tens of thousands of dollars. And by now, he usually knows he has Candida. Some doctor along the line did a test on it, but the doctor very often doesn't know the full impact the Candida could make. So the doctor says, "Oh yeah, and by the way, you have Candida along with this vitamin deficiency and all this." So when the patient starts then reading the impact that Candida can create on the body and all the symptoms, usually that's the aha moment that they'll have.
It almost helps to understand, but even then, once they say you have Candida medically, then what do we do? Obviously, their systems is going to cure them that, and yours actually your method will.
What will happen is that the patient and the doctor will talk. The doctor will say, yes, you have Candida. He shows them the test. I'm going to put you on nystatin, and you're going to take this nystatin for a few months, and then it should go away. And by the way, follow this diet, avoid sugar, avoid spaghetti or something like this. The patient will do this. They'll get better, and that validates the fact that this diagnosis must be true. But then it stops. Then it all comes back again as the Candida mutates.
Got 21 days.
After 21 days, it starts. So it's very typical that we hear from the person. I was told I had Candida. I got put on this program for a few months. I felt great, and then it all came roaring back. That's the person who's then going to go out and research more, and they're going to come across my information.
Got it. Anything else I missed off for this show? We're kind of wrapping up right at this point.
I think we're good. No, I think we're
good. All right, let's 5 seconds smile for the thumbnail like the New York Yankees won the World Series next year.
I'm in.
All right, that's the plan. I'm going to end the show, my friends. Thanks for watching. Hang out for 1 second, Doc. End the show real quick.